The next one is a tick bite the only way to get Lyme disease? If not, what other way? Fleas, lice, etc.
So a tick bite is not the only way to get Lyme disease. The spirochetes have been found in bodily fluids, semen, and the Bartonella, one of the co-infections, can be transmitted by fleas and lice as well. So the answer to that question is no. It's not just from a tick. It's unfortunately can be sexually transmitted as well.
Babesia is now found tainted in Babesia is now found tainted in the blood supply and not checked yet. So there's real problems. We're here to look, all the and let me reinforce how great this is, because this is really how we are better. All these minds to come up with answers. This is how medicine works. It works not in a vacuum or not in a silo. It works as a community. And you're part of that.
All right, thanks, guys. The next question is, what exactly is happening to the body when someone is herxing?
So the Herxheimer reaction, as Dr. Stram said, was first noted in patients with syphilis who were treated with, are you ready for this, arsenic to kill the bacteria. They didn't call it arsenic, of course, they called it salvarsan or some other drug name. But it was noticed that almost immediately after people who were infected with syphilis that took this drug, their symptoms got worse, sometimes significantly worse. And so Herxheimer, the doctor, postulated at that time that it was due to the death of the spirochete, and because it is a very large bacterial cell that consists of toxins, there are toxic substances in the outer shells of these things. When they die, that's released into your body. It triggers an inflammatory response because your immune system is trying to process these things. And so it's sort of a systemic inflammatory response to the death of the microorganisms before your body's actually able to clear them. And sometimes that inflammation is quite significant, and I don't know much from the medical perspective, but I know that people on occasion have to be treated to actually reduce the inflammation because it gets that severe with steroids and other, anti-inflammatory type drugs.
The next question is very interesting. When is your Lyme disease considered chronic Lyme disease?
So Lyme disease is considered chronic after 6 months to a year.
We'll give about 3 more questions, guys. What treatments are currently being used to treat post-treatment Lyme syndrome, even many years after the initial antibiotic treatment?
I think actually that question was sort of answered. The one problem with that is post Lyme syndrome. Is that a reinfection? Is that a persistent infection? And that's difficult to know. Did you completely eradicate it? Is this just now inflammatory processes? And that's where you look at diet, exercise, yoga, lifestyle. But those are the questions. Some of the problems is that potentially persistent infection or reinfection is considered post-Lyme syndrome. And some, docs, again, well-intentioned, believe that after a month of treatment with a single antibiotic, where we mentioned that typically that's not done in infectious diseases, that, if you have a pneumonia and you go to your doctor and he treats you and you say, you know what, I'm still short of breath, I'm still coughing, and I still have a fever, typically changes the antibiotics. Doesn't say you have post-pneumonia syndrome, and the result is that you continue to get short of breath and have fevers. It just typically you don't say that. Or post-sinus infection syndrome, or post-tuberculosis consumption syndrome, because I'm only going to treat you with one antibiotic for a month. So the question is that syndrome true, or is it just ineffective treatment? When immunizations are done on animals, they do not develop post-Lyme syndrome, which sort of changes the concept that this is all about an overactive autoimmune response. Another question I know was asked in there was, can you have elevation of rheumatoid factors, lupus, sort of these autoimmune diseases? The answer is yes. That is the problem.
If chronic Lyme exists, then why do so many doctors from both hospitals and regular doctors' offices not believe in it? Do you think it's something else? Another loaded one.
Okay, and I'm going to speak because I'm not a practitioner of anything and other than microbiology. And the debate over whether there is such a thing as chronic Lyme disease, and what that is, it's the term that's used to describe persisting symptoms after either long-term symptoms or even after antibiotic treatment. And the question is it a real disease? Is it an autoimmune disease? Is it caused by persistence of the organisms that are causing it? And I think everybody should know that currently in ticks, there are at least 6 different types of bacteria. There is a protozoa, Babesia. There are at least 2 viruses that are known to cause encephalitis, and any or all of them can be transmitted in one single tick bite. And it doesn't take 36 hours for Borrelia is one thing. Borrelia, it actually does take some time because of the biology of the symbiosis, I'm starting to sound like a professor, I'm sorry, between the tick and the bacteria, but the others are found in blood cells. They live in red blood cells and white blood cells, so if they are left on the mouth parts of the tick, the next person that gets bit is going to have those things transmitted into them. So all of them, every last one of them, are highly adapted symbionts. They are remarkable in the bacterial world because they get into the human body and they want to hide. They don't want to attract the attention of your immune system. They go to places that are referred to in microbiology as protective niches, which would include your central nervous system, inside, as I mentioned, red blood cells and white blood cells. And the simple fact is all of them have been shown, they're referred to as stealth pathogens. They have these remarkable strategies. They produce all kinds of biological effects. So and persistence has been proven in the scientific literature. In fact, the preponderance of the scientific evidence would indicate that these things are persisting, and the persistence of the bacteria is what causes the persisting symptoms. Unfortunately, the Infectious Disease Society of America has decided that that is not the case. A relatively small number of individuals within that group have come up with guidelines that say, nope, there's no scientific evidence to indicate that that is the case, that chronic Lyme disease exists, but that is not the case. There are hundreds, literally hundreds of articles published in the scientific literature that point to persistence of not just Borrelia, but the other bacteria as well that can cause long-term symptoms. So, did I answer the question?
Oh, yes.
Did I answer the question?
A plus, A plus.
Not quite. So the answer is, why don't the doctors, what's up with the doctors? And I think the answer to that question is the IDSA, who Holly was talking about, is an extremely powerful, it's the oldest professional medical organization in the country. They're extremely powerful. They do a lot of their own research that supports the conclusions. So they say, my shirt is blue, and they will prove it by doing another study that comes up with a color that's like this and says, see, it's blue. And that's what's happening. The doctors who are, the regular medical community, like Dr. Stram says, they want to help, but they're really overwhelmed. They have to go to the CDC website to see what are they supposed to do if somebody comes in with these symptoms. And they're going to the IDSA guidelines, and the guidelines, give this sort of very skewed, not correct, very partial information. The doctors don't want to get involved in litigation, they don't want to get in trouble, and so they just do what they're told. And so this whole backstory about what's happening behind the medical scenes is really extraordinary.
And then I'll stop. But, you know, one of the previous questions was about insurance. And in case you're wondering why your insurance will not cover treatments for Lyme disease, it's because chronic Lyme disease does not exist as far as a medical diagnosis is concerned, which means there is no code, ICD-9 code, for chronic Lyme disease, which means that regardless of what the clinical diagnosis is, without that code, your insurance company can say, you know, we are not going to pay for this treatment or that treatment, and that is why, you know, for example, for IV antibiotics, you get 1 month of IV antibiotics, and beyond that, you have to pay for it on your own. So that needs to be changed, obviously, and that's kind of what we're doing.
And to speak to the IV antibiotics, typically 1 month of IV antibiotics is all that's covered if you're lucky enough to have the insurance that will actually cover that. We have, however, found a company called InfuServe America that is providing us with IV antibiotics that are actually affordable, that are not, you know, outrageous, and that, you know, our patients can actually afford to pay out of pocket for continuing treatment. So there are some options out there for people whose insurance does not want to cover IV therapy, whether at all or only for 1 month. So, and we do have that information available. You know, if anybody is interested, we do use them quite a bit. So.
All right, and we just got one more question in at the last minute, and it's a technical one. How about a blood transfusion? Can that give you Lyme? Yes. All right, with that, guys, first, I'd just like to personally thank our panel. We have professors, policy experts, practitioners, I hope it was informational. If you guys do need more information, feel free to call the Stram Center. We are a place that's welcoming. We do have a support group going on Thursday at 6 p.m. Dr. Stram and a guest facilitator will be hosting that. So feel free to call the Stram Center to sign up. And thank you for spreading awareness.